So,
you
I've
lose
got
access to
all
the
your
knowledge.
questions. I can see some of you tried desperately hard to stump our amazing panelists, which is really exciting. There's a few in here about representation engineering and model merging and other things, so we'll let one of you tackle those. But let me start out with something that probably people want to learn about a little bit more. So I'm going to kind of merge some of these questions together. I would say this is a question that always kind of comes up in these contexts and is phrased in a variety of ways in these questions. And it goes something like this. We're doing ministry and Bible translation or digital engagement, digital discipleship. We're trying to use AI. What are the limits of what AI can do, and how do we keep humans in the loop? And then kind of paired with that often is the comment about, hey, we can't farm everything out to AI. Somehow the Holy Spirit has to be involved in our ministry work. So how is that affected by tying in this technology to our ministries? So I think the question is, how is the human involved and how is the Spirit involved as we integrate this technology?
I'll start a response to that. I think in part, we have to remember that AI cannot do anything a human cannot do. I think that sometimes we think that somehow it's a magical thing that can invent information or ways to do things, but it can do no better than a human. It might be able to do it relentlessly at night, 24/7, but it can't do things that we cannot. And I think it's important to remember it. And the second thing that I always try to remember is I always think of it as kind of like a teammate. It helps me do things better. And it's not something that I would leave alone or tend to things on its own, but it's a teammate. And I think if we kind of remember those things, that's a great start.
If I can add something to that, I'm a senior vice president at Johnny and Friends, and one of the things about trying to address this technology that can be very useful in some spaces within the ministry. There's a lot of fear out there because there's a lot of unknown and a lot of uncertainty, and so people will listen to the little sound bites or, on Facebook, and they get even more scared. So I think one of the ways to keep humans in the loop, really, and being able to use this technology for kingdom purposes is something as practical as education and training. Because one of the things, and the Center for Humane Technology talks about this quite a bit, about the wisdom gap. So this is a technology that's being embedded in almost every system that ministries use, all kinds of corporations use, but then so that's getting more and more complex. It's embedded everywhere, but our capacity to respond to it as humans or as institutions is dropping. So that's this huge wisdom gap. And so I think that we have an opportunity to step in that wisdom gap by doing education and training. And a lot of what was said today up on stage, I think, resonates with doing that. And I think that we need to work together in order to do that, to keep the humans in the loop.
One of the things that comes to my mind is when I teach Sunday school to these 4- and 5-year-olds every week, there's a lot of great materials out there. If you go to the Bloom Library, there's a lot of great pictures. But when I teach to that group, they need pictures. And I need to make sure that when I talk about Jesus, he looks the same in slide 1 as he does in slide 6. But a lot of times when I'm talking about different stories, different scripture, we only have a few images, and it's just really hard to keep their attention. One of the projects I did with a couple of my undergraduate students this year was use Dolly, use Midjourney, and try to come up, how do we figure out how to use these tools to get the right images, enough images that really capture their attention. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot about that. You just can't feed in the full, you can't just feed in the full book of Ruth and get the images you want. You got to, there's a lot of prompting there. There's a lot of overlap in the story to get the right ones. But that was something that we got an opportunity to explore with this year. Those girls won first place at our Purdue Undergrad Research Conference for that poster, so I was really excited. But I think the thing, not to forget, we're not changing the AI's heart. We have to be changing human hearts. So when you talk to the kids, I just don't see how an AI could do that. We're going to have a hand in that. We're just using AI to help us, show people Christ.
I think even touching on what you just said, recognizing the limits of what we're doing is extremely important. A lot of people even come and talk to me about this idea that we're building this question answering system, and they might say something, come up to me and say, oh, this question that I asked has been answered wrong. And then when in reality it's just a different answer to what they would give. And I think recognizing that even for us as humans within the ministry space, there's a bunch of different opinions on a lot of these different things, and recognizing, okay, what does it look like to create different technology that is able to lead people in the correct direction, but also know when and where to be able to say, you know what, sometimes people have different opinions, and this technology needs to be able to go, okay, look, let's provide maybe multiple different opinions on a certain topic that is extremely hard, where theologically, even as humans, we might have differing views.
Yeah, I wonder, Stu, I remember when we first started talking, and I was talking to Ruben and you, and we were talking about chatbots in the evangelistic context online. And at that point, my mind was not was not quite where theirs was. And I wonder if I wonder if it's possible for someone to come to faith in Christ in a conversation with a chatbot online, and what does that bring up? And I think I remember Ruben. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's happening," and I'm like, "Oh, show me." And he showed me, and so I know that you were wrestling with this early in terms of, hey, isn't evangelism kind of a work of the Spirit, and something he kind of involves people in as part of his church? So how did you wrestle with that early on, and how has your perspective either stayed the same or changed over time?
Yeah, big question. In answer to the first part of the question, I don't know where the limits are.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure any of us actually do. How have we wrestled with that? We've sought to do a lot of experiments. We've tried to consider the implications of our work in light of what we already know, but recognize that there's boundaries. Like, a lot of this stuff is very new. So we have theories, we have a sense of where those limitations may be, but we've sought to, in a very controlled way, learn from the actual experiences of deploying, like in this case, chatbots. And to our surprise, we've seen a range of outcomes that even challenge some of our own preconceived notions of where some of those limitations are. So we've seen, on the whole, the best results when a chatbot in combination with a human for evangelistic and discipleship outcomes. But on the same token, we've seen examples where a person who is exploring has had an experience with just a chatbot, a retrieval model bot, so the person has had control over what options are enabled in that interaction. But a person has come to know Jesus, even been connected independently with a church without any human directly in that loop. And that's a really wonderful thing. And it challenges us to go, even though that we have these preconceived ideas, what does this mean? Because that's a great outcome. And I think what we've learned is there's an optimal scenario, but we also see that God is not limited in how he can outwork his plans and reach people by some of the ways that we imagine. And I think that's where we're at. We're always exploring, open to learn, and recognize that there's a lot of research that's still required.
Great answer. So I have a question. Maybe Ian, you could start this one out, and others, I'm sure, are wrestling with these same issues. I know even in my own work, it's often a struggle to navigate like, oh, these models were trained on this data, and so I can use them in these ways without getting into trouble. Or I think a lot of organizations in here, I think the heart is, hey, we want to release as much as we can, but we also recognize that, the communities that are producing some of this language data, for example, are there clear terms and service around, like, we want to release this, but what's their opinion? So do you have any sort of general tips for those organizations that are maybe digging into this area and just unsure of, what models to use or where to start or where they could get themselves in trouble? Just kind of any sort of practical tips for people dipping in, and then anyone that's kind of dug in a little bit deeper, any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah. Am I on? I am. Okay. I think at one level that question really is just about the quality of the data, the inputs, and isn't really a legal question. I don't have any sense right now, based on guidance that I've read or lawsuits that I've seen, that mere use of an LLM or one of these chatbots, one of these engines to generate content is going to subject you as the user to liability. You are not the one who built that engine and put the data into it, which was potentially a copyright violation by the developers. You are querying the model, so you're getting content out of it, either images, potentially videos now, or some kind of textual content. Unless you're querying it in a way so as to generate something that is substantially similar to a copyrighted work, you're not going to be subject to liability. Like you really have to sort of almost trick these models into generating something that really is copyrighted. So like I went through because there's a lawsuit by Sarah Silverman based on one of her books against, I think it's OpenAI that they sued. I went into ChatGPT and I tried to get it to give me a summary of her book, then a summary of her chapter, and then a summary of her chapter in her particular voice. Like, you can get it to get you there, which is getting closer and closer to a copyright violation. But unless you're doing that specifically so that you can then push out content where you're trying to copy somebody else's expression, I wouldn't worry about it that much. What I would worry about more is less on the legal side and more, is this good quality content data that's gone into this model such that what I'm getting out of it is reliable, is accurate, et cetera. I hope that helps answer the question a little bit. Unless you're building the model, I would not worry about legal liability as much, simply as a user.
All right. So one question, this question was specifically tied to Bible translation, but I think I can make it maybe a little bit more general. So in Bible translation, for those of you that don't know, we, as part of the E10 Alliance, have goals to reach certain milestones by the year 2033. These are called the All Access Goals. And I think we've been exploring technology and advanced technology for some time now, but it can definitely seem like, hey, when do we see the momentum increase? Where things still seem so slow. And maybe for those that aren't in Bible translation, you could comment as well. But in a lot of cases, what I've seen is people think AI is going to make their problems instantly easier and accelerate a lot of things. And maybe that does happen over time, but it can be sort of disenchanting when you actually get into it and then you don't see what you're wanting. So any suggestions from any of you in terms of adoption of this technology, and in particular towards measurable milestones that you really want to connect to your organization's vision and mission? That was a stumper question. Yeah, so the question was, in adopting AI technology, how do you ensure that you connect that adoption with your organization's vision and mission, and maybe particular milestones that you're trying to achieve to make sure you're just not spinning your wheels on cool technology.
So for us, we came up with a set of kind of guiding principles to make sure that everything that we did directly contributed to our mission and our vision. And so we tried to ask ourselves a couple of questions. Yeah, some of the stuff is like, oh, cool, new toy, shiny, right? And, oh, we need that. Well, do you? And so, for us on the discipleship side, does it directly contribute to an individual's spiritual growth through either our ministry app or our personal app? And if that answer is no, well, then let's not do that. Now, if there's a compelling reason to do so, well, then maybe that's a good thing. I was having a discussion out in the lobby with somebody just a little bit earlier about this idea of voice cloning and how that might be used. Well, one of the things that we always talk about in artificial intelligence is this concept of trust. We see it in robotics. Do I trust it? And the common human tendency is to over-trust something, but there's also distrust. And so we always talk about this idea of calibrated trust that needs to be appropriate for the AI engine or the robotic engine that you're using. And one of the things in voice cloning is, well, why would you want to do that? Because it seems kind of creepy. But one of the things when you relate to people is a voice is trustful. So let's say I've listened to this pastor for decades, and I learned to trust that person. And now I ingest or train an LLM with that person's work or that person's content. And now I ask it a question. The mere fact that it might answer back in that person's voice creates this human connection with the data that's one of trust. Maybe that's appropriate, maybe it's not appropriate. That's a kind of a slight difference. But I think at the core, if it contributes to whatever that core mission or core vision of whatever the organization is, and just because it's shiny doesn't mean it's the right thing.
Yeah. Dan, I think one of the things that in this recent advancement, AI advancement, is this sense of like generalized capabilities. But for organizations, I still think that the best way to set up a path for success is to think really narrowly about the highly specific problems that are unique to your organization. I guess maybe because of the momentum in recent times, there's almost like a FOMO effect around AI, such that the objective becomes about like adoption. Like, are we using the tools? Are we getting some kind of AI expression inside of our organization? That's probably going to lead to a path of failure or kind of not living up to the hope that you're expecting. But be really specific about the problems that are absolutely unique to your mission and ministry context, and then recognize that the capabilities within whatever kind of AI application or task you're trying to resolve, as narrowly defined as possible, is the most likely path to getting good results, imperfect as they inevitably probably will be as well.
I'll chime in too, I guess just from the lawyer's perspective on that question. Be careful about what you're allowing your organization to do and what you're allowing employees to do. One of the things I've encountered a lot in my practice is I work with a lot of ministry organizations. All of them are well-meaning and have good hearts, but they'll have employees who they don't know what they're doing, and they're not aware that they've misused something that they shouldn't. They use some content, for example, that they shouldn't have, and that becomes either a source of friction between ministries if you took it from somebody else or a religious leader, or it becomes a source of liability or scrutiny. Bad PR is a problem as well. So consider having technology policies in place and training employees on, for example, if you want to use someone's voice or their image or their content, you want to replicate that or duplicate that in some way, be sure that you have the rights to do that. You've got requisite permissions and licenses. Be sure your employees are aware of that. I'm a little bit worried that the current environment, everything is thought of as data, and it's just kind of Wild West, and we're all going to sort of grab as much data as we possibly can, and we're going to shove it into these engines. We're going to produce a bunch of content. And I think that diminishes or corrodes the idea that there still are rights, whether it's copyrights or name, image, likeness rights or whatever. So be cautious about that. It's something that you need to pay attention to. You might have policies on. You might need to train employees on as well.
I would add to that too, because at Johnny and Friends as the senior vice president, I am actually developing because we have Salesforce and we have Lattice, those are two systems that have AI components, and talking about they're embedded, and so there's certain features that we need that are still narrow, but we need it to for our ministry, some applications of our ministry. I'm developing a strategic roadmap for using AI. They're turned off right now, but there are certain features that we can't use simply because the staff is not trained on them yet, and just to try to avoid some of the pitfalls. So I think it's critically important when you look at some of these systems now that are you can use in a ministry process, realizing what is the AI capability. So one very practical example for us is Lattice, and in Lattice you can develop career paths, which is great. To take Johnny and Friends kind of the next level. The thing is about turning on career paths is that you have to turn on the AI piece, right? So even for using it very narrowly to look at career paths across the organization. So that means before we can use that, though we've spent the money, I have to develop this sort of strategic roadmap first. So it's really critical, I think, to avoid some of the legal or ethical and theological issues to train and to think more strategically, but also to have that strategic foresight to realize, okay, if we're going to go, so you need to look 1, 3, and 5 years down the road when you're considering new systems, because it's everywhere. Everywhere, even Adobe. Now it's like, they'll come to my office and say, Dr. K, so there's this assistant on Adobe now. What do we do about that? So everywhere we turn, we're having to deal with that. So the education and training, I think, is critical. But I also think there's opportunity to collaborate on what that training should look like within a Christian organization, right?
I'll add one thing from university perspective. We've really gone all in our mission and vision on technology. We just really identified that there's so many opportunities, and just feedback from our corporate partners. They're expecting our graduates to be effective. How do you use these LLM models and all these new technologies effectively? That's what we want. Our school just is launching this brand new program. Professor Muhammad Rahman, good friend of mine, he designed this new program called Masters in Business and Technology, MBT. It's the only program in the country like this, where half the courses they take in our MIS area, basically a lot of our kind of business analytics courses, and then the other half of the courses they take in our School of Engineering. So you guys know Purdue's an engineering school, so we're really trying to bridge those strengths. But this is an opportunity that kind of our senior faculty and leadership identified to say, hey, these are our strengths. This is what we're hearing from our corporate partners. Let's be a leader here and really embrace technology, because it's not going away.
I might just add to that, when you talk about milestones, I think for us, a big thing is, as we really try and push forward to this large vision and we're building this really large kind of Christian super app, it really is thinking through for us. I'm always kind of saying to the team, what's the evidence behind what we're doing? As we look towards every single feature, what's the evidence that that's going to help someone? Kind of why are we looking at that? What is the reasoning behind that feature? And I think even thinking through with a lot of your organizations, it's not about what can we do, it's about really working out what are we not doing. And it's really reframing it and understanding for a lot of you guys, there's so many different areas in which your organization could be paving the way and helping people when it comes to utilizing this new technology, but it's working out, okay, these are the things that we're actually maybe not good at, and these are the things that we actually don't see being able to help people in. And even for us, it's working out, okay, look, these aren't the features that I think that we're going to be able to do properly, so that's not what we're going to do. These aren't the features that I believe that are really going to be able to help people, so we're not going to do. And then at the end of the day, it kind of just leaves the features and the things and the projects that we go, okay, these are the things that we can truly help people in and give a good offering in.
Great. Yeah, and I think you highlighted the sort of diverse range of experiences that might be at the table and understanding that. I would kind of echo off of what Matthew and I talked about as well, in that your organization, in trying to adopt this technology, you don't have to do it alone. And the perspective of coming to the table and saying, oh, well, this sort of tech industry is anti-Christian. I've sort of found that to be actually even the opposite, if anything is true. Certainly there's cases to bring up in that. So I forgot that this was a practical AI panel, but I do a podcast, Practical AI, and we've been going 6 years. We're like 260 episodes in. I've interviewed people from almost every sector of the AI industry and all the sort of major AI companies. I have conversations with them before and after episodes. And, we talk about these things. They're all very gracious. No one's sort of like after you, right? So the very worst thing that can happen is you reach out collaboratively to industry, to academia, and say, hey, we're working on this like cool stuff in Bible translation and digital engagement. And the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, no, we're not really interested in that, right? It's not like they're going to form a team and put a line item budget around preventing your organization from doing what you're doing. No, they don't have time to do that, right? The best result, though, is you're going to form some amazing collaborations across industry and academia. So you're not in this alone. There's a lot of people that have navigated this path before. So yeah, I would encourage that. So one kind of fun question, and then I'll kind of do a wrap-up question. I thought it was interesting, this question. Someone asked, do we know what other religions are trying to do with AI?
Just to touch on this, there's actually a really great article in Scientific American this month, and it talks about this very idea, that there's a bunch of different other religious organizations, not just Christianity, but a lot happening even in the Muslim culture with the Quran, and in places like India. So there definitely is a lot happening in the area, and I think time will tell kind of how that goes. I think even for us as Christians, it is really recognizing that this technology is coming, whether we embrace it or not. In a lot of ways, it is easy for Christians, and specifically maybe an older generation, to be unsure as to how we could utilize this technology, or even if we should be at all. And I don't believe that's probably anyone in this room, but there definitely is a lot of people within our greater society. And it is understanding that we really have this opportunity now to be able to step up and even push forward in reaching this generation and the next generation when it comes to putting Christianity at the forefront of what it looks like to reach new people and allow them to come into our group and really understand what Jesus' teachings were and are.
Yeah, so we've had some students, basically, like I said, 80% of our students are usually from India. Some of those students are Hindu, and I know some of them have done projects with other companies as part of their, like this semester they did one in their database class with a Hindu organization, and it was great. They did such a great project, and I asked them about it, and they're acting weird, and I said, I was like, you guys did so good. And they're like, oh, we didn't know if you would like it or not. I said, why wouldn't I like it? I tell you I love you every day. Of course I like it. I'm so proud of you. This is great. You should showcase this on your portfolio. But, as far as our school is concerned, there's no constraints on anything like that. Me personally, I'm just thankful. I think we should be really thankful for people that have spirituality. They're spiritual people, because those are the people that really want to talk about Christ. I mean, yeah, so whatever religion they are, they're the ones that will come and say, hey, can you tell me more about why you believe what you believe? So yeah, just use those as an opportunity.
All right, last question, and this is like a one-sentence answer, right? So think about your one sentence, because this is what everyone's going to be thinking about, these one-sentence responses as they fall asleep tonight. So they have to be very, very profound, very, very profound. So we started out today, Jonathan did a really great job at bringing us into a perspective of having a good posture towards how we engage with this community, with this technology, with our own work. I'm wondering, for each of you, someone can be brave enough to go first, and others can think of their one sentence. But in one sentence, what would you highlight as an element of a good posture that has been helpful for each of you as you consider adoption of this AI technology, use of it, education around it, whatever that is? Does it make sense? All right.
I'll go first. Reframe from the question, does it work, to is it useful?
We always just ask the question, is what I'm doing glorifying to God?
I'll answer. I mean, just keep Christ at the center of whatever it is you're doing.
I would say, this idea that Abraham's calling is our calling, and that thinking about using this technology and leaving those spiritual breadcrumbs for the higher purpose.
Mine would be open to what God can do.
Well, I guess one of the postures I remember this morning that stuck with me, and I was so glad that I saw, who was the guy that started us off? Jonathan. I was so glad he said that, because I thought, this is great. I'm so glad I'm here. Stay humble. Humility is, man, it could change everything. So stay humble. We don't know everything about these technologies, but to stay humble and just keep learning, I think that's just so important.